Every mansion is said to have memories, but hers has hints of grief, love, and magic. The previously colorful home of the woman who enchanted the world with a single twitch of her nose is tucked away among California's hills. 3 children were left to protect the mysteries of their mother's magical history after her untimely death, when the lights went out and the laughter subsided. What actually transpired within the deserted home of the witch who once inspired millions of people to believe in magic? Her story is far from over, so stick around to find out who she really was. The world was captivated by a woman's smile and a little twitch of her nose even before social media or streaming. She was Samantha Stevens, the sweet, funny, and enchanted witch who made an effort to lead a typical home life. Every moment she wiggled her nose, the ordinary became magical, and the turmoil became laughing. Week after week, families gathered in front of their TVs to watch Samantha's next spell. Samantha was more than just a character, though, despite her elegant elegance and sparkling eyes. A woman whose true tale was as intriguing as the one she portrayed brought her to life. Born on April 15, 1933, she was named Elizabeth Victoria Montgomery. Millions of people just saw a little portion of her genius on film. In a society that frequently attempted to control her, off-screen Elizabeth was resolute, fearless, and unafraid to disobey the norms. Her career lasted for 50 years. After starting her career on stage, she went on to film before achieving her greatest level of recognition on television. Everything changed with the 1964 premiere of Bewitched. Elizabeth became a worldwide celebrity as a result of the show's success. Although she was beautiful, what people remembered most about her was her kindness and quiet confidence. Her 5 Primetime Emmy and 4 Golden Globe nominations demonstrate that genuine brilliance is always recognized, even in the glamorous world. She and her husband, Robert Foxworth, owned a serene lakefront estate in Agoura Hills, California, and resided in their lovely Beverly Hills house until her death in 1995. The house was the ideal fusion of timeless charm and natural beauty, reflecting Elizabeth's taste for tranquility and sophistication. It included large, light-filled living spaces, a warm fireplace, and a Moroccan-style lounge for small parties. She frequently spent peaceful mornings surrounded by the aroma of pine and lake air on the meditation terrace that led from her private master suite. The home's magical ambiance was enhanced by stone pathways that led to covered cabanas, a spa grotto, and a waterfall outside. Elizabeth found equilibrium here, enjoying quiet and introspection away from the never-ending spotlight of celebrity. There was a mysterious origin to the magic that made Samantha renowned. The script never included the well-known nose twitch that became her characteristic. In real life, Elizabeth had a slight anxious habit. She was advised to use it as Samantha's magical gesture by her husband, William Asher, who also directed the production. What started off as a peculiarity turned into one of the most memorable scenes on television. Her unique touch was even reflected in the name of her character. Elizabeth felt the name sounded too harsh, but the writers had intended to nickname the witch Cassandra. Instead, she recommended Samantha, a kinder, more approachable name that aptly reflected the gentle strength of her spirit. However, beneath the radiance of this international celebrity was a childhood tainted by stress, grief, and secrets. Let's return to the origins of the spell, to the darkness that molded the witch. Elizabeth's existence was encircled by lights, cameras, and expectations as soon as she opened her eyes. She came from one of the wealthiest families in Hollywood, where becoming famous was a daily occurrence rather than a pipe dream. Robert Montgomery, her father, was a well-known actor and filmmaker who commanded charm and confidence on both large and small screens. Theatergoers appreciated her mother, Elizabeth Allen, for her strong stage presence and her elegance and composure on Broadway. The Montgomery appeared ideal to the outside world. However, a subtle tension that would determine Elizabeth's fate was developing inside their sparkling world. The family had already experienced sorrow before Elizabeth was born. Martha Bryan, her older sister, had passed away when still a baby. Her parents' emotions were forever burdened by the tragedy. Elizabeth's arrival served as a reminder of their lost things, as well as a source of joy. Throughout her early years, that silent weight followed her, driving her to strive for perfection and to fill the void left by death. She had a privileged upbringing. The family traveled throughout Europe and lived in an opulent mansion in New York during the summers. She grew up surrounded by well-known people who were friends with her parents, rode horses, and went to formal events. From the outside, her world appeared to be magical. Elizabeth, however, felt constrained by expectations she never chose despite her charm. Every door was opened by her family name. However, it also turned into the very thing that bound her to a life over which she had little control. She received a rigorous and well-trained education at the Westlake School for Girls in Los Angeles, where she was a student. Appearances and discipline were more important than aspirations. She later relocated to New York, where she enrolled in one of the city's most prominent schools, the Spence School. Elizabeth, however, yearned for something more than politeness and high society. She was drawn to acting more than anything else. In an attempt to create her own identity on her own terms, she enrolled in Manhattan's American Academy of Dramatic Arts. The crowd, however, was not her greatest obstacle. Her father was the one. Because of his pride and traditional views, Robert Montgomery disapproved of his daughter's decision to follow in her footsteps. He frequently cautioned her that acting demanded complete dedication and that putting up a mediocre effort would only result in embarrassment. He believed that a lady he loved had no place in the realm of celebrity. However, those remarks just strengthened Elizabeth's resolve to disprove him. Elizabeth's resolve to resist her father's authority strengthened as she matured. She was prepared to venture out into the world that had both nourished and confined her for the first time. You wouldn't believe how that first act of disobedience would lead her to both success and heartache. Elizabeth Montgomery entered a world that both captivated and terrified her when she was just 18 years old. She made an appearance on her father's show, Robert Montgomery Presents, in an episode titled Top Secret. She could feel her father's expectations pressing down on her as she stood in front of the camera under his direction. But something inside her altered when the scenario started. Her anxiety vanished, to be replaced by a silent power that made everyone take notice. It was more than just a first performance. It was a proclamation. Living under the shadow of her father was not enough for Elizabeth. She desired to have her own name, light, and narrative. She quickly made it on Broadway because to her perseverance. Her real acting debut would come in 1956 when she starred in the film Late Love. Her role earned her the Theatre World Award, and critics complimented her innate grace and emotional depth. As the theater erupted in cheers that evening, Elizabeth finally experienced the independence she had long yearned for. She was aware that every victory had a price, though, despite the glitz. Her father, whose delight was tinged with contempt, became more emotionally distant from her with each accomplishment. Elizabeth had to continuously strike a balance between rebellion and discipline as her career took off. Her goal was to question Hollywood's ideal of what a woman ought to be. However, she was also aware of the ease with which the industry penalized nonconformists. She was too human to be immune to the suffering her decisions caused, yet she was also too strong to be shaped. Although Elizabeth had struggled to live her life as she saw fit, fate had another twist in store for her. What role would ultimately create her immortality and make her a threat to herself? Stay tuned to find out. Nobody could have predicted how profoundly Bewitched would alter television and culture when it debuted in 1964. During its early years, the show was one of the best-rated shows in America and ran for 8 seasons on ABC until 1972. It told the tale of Samantha Stevens, a good-hearted witch who tried to lead a typical suburban life after falling in love with a mortal man. Every show combined passion, humor, and a dash of magic to produce something viewers had never seen before. However, the show was much more than a family sitcom, since it conveyed lessons about identity, power, and independence behind the laughing. Samantha's ability to strike a balance between tradition and disobedience was what made her so endearing. Samantha demonstrated that a woman may be both autonomous and loving during a period when women were supposed to be submissive and quiet. She refused to deny who she was, but she also wanted peace at home. Bewitched was a show that subtly stretched the limits of the 1960s because of this subtly defiant attitude. Later, feminist readers interpreted Samantha as a representation of women's attempts to assert their independence in a society that pushed for conformity. Viewers witnessed strength wrapped in tenderness, as Elizabeth Montgomery vividly portrayed this contradiction. Deeper societal themes were also mentioned in the series, but they were not explicitly named. Similar to marginalized people who felt compelled to hide who they really were, witches on Bewitched were frequently forced to hide their abilities. In a daring move for its day, an episode created by African-American students in 1970 tackled racial prejudice head-on. However, critics later noted that the program frequently favored comedy over conflict, so reducing the severity of social critique. Nevertheless, Bewitched had a subtle, enduring force because of its attempt to utilize imagination to represent actual challenges. There was a tale of ingenuity and luck behind the magic. The show's renowned nose twitch, which has since become one of the most recognizable movements on television, started out as a straightforward mishap. Montgomery's husband and the show's director, William Asher, recalled witnessing her twitch one evening before production while preparing a drink. "That's it," he said, understanding that would be the perfect approach to reveal Samantha's powers. Montgomery also contributed to the development of her persona. Elizabeth objected to the witch's original name, Cassandra, and asked that it be changed. Samantha, she thought, sounded friendlier and more human. The character became one of the most adored characters in television history, thanks to that one decision. The stakes increased, along with her power. However, you would be surprised to learn of the private scandals and unspoken pressures that were simmering behind the spell-throwing and laughter that would soon jeopardize her revered reputation. Fame had brought her wealth, recognition, and a worldwide following. But there were significant sacrifices involved as well. Her love stories frequently reflected the emotional turmoil of her on-screen magic, and her private life turned into a whirlwind of passion, treachery, and despair. On paper, Elizabeth and Frederick Gallatin Kame's 1955 first marriage appeared to be ideal. Her father approved of him, he was respected, and he was rich. However, the partnership ended after just a year. Elizabeth came to the realization very soon that she could not live a life based on expectations instead of love. She soon wed the charismatic actor Gig Young, whose dark moods and addiction overshadowed his appeal. Their 1963 marriage was characterized by strife and hopelessness. Their house was a volatile environment because of Gig's battle with drinking and his rage. Elizabeth knew she had to flee in order to survive, so when she eventually left, she was exhausted rather than angry. She fell in love and achieved success with director William Asher in 1963. They had 3 children together, William, Robert, and Rebecca, and co-created one of the most famous television programs, Bewitched. It appeared to be the ideal Hollywood marriage for a while. However, conditions behind the scenes were everything but perfect. Fame couldn't conceal the tensions caused by Asher's infidelity and Elizabeth's developing intimacy with another show director. Eventually, their marriage fell apart due to animosity and rumors. The fairy tale couple who had created a magical world on television were unable to maintain their own magic in real life. Elizabeth's name was frequently associated with well-known men like Dean Martin and Elvis Presley, even after her marriages. The rumors, whether accurate or not, contributed to her reputation as a seductive and impenetrable woman who was coveted by everyone but understood by few. Her self-assurance and conventional male domination occasionally clashed. The relationship between Samantha and Darren on Bewitched, in which a powerful woman tries to fit into a society that constantly tells her to be smaller, was mirrored in many ways in her marriage to Asher. Elizabeth Montgomery was a proud mother of 3 kids who helped to balance and lighten her hectic life. In 1964, she gave birth to her first son, William Asher Jr., and in 1965, her second son, Robert Asher. Her youngest child, a daughter named Rebecca Asher, was born 2 years later in 1969. They all turned into the center of her universe, and in spite of her notoriety and the long hours required for television work, Elizabeth made sure her kids were raised in a loving environment free from the demands of Hollywood. She frequently referred to being a mother as her greatest joy, finding solace and stability in her kids that came with not being famous. Elizabeth raised her voice for important concerns outside of the gossip world. She worked with Amnesty International, advocated for democracy, defended LGBTQ rights, and was a passionate feminist. When few ventured to talk about AIDS, she fought against its harsh stigma. Beneath her advocacy and glowing celebrity, however, was a lady who yearned for peace. She fought loneliness and a never-ending quest for approval in private. She had pushed for what she believed in, bucked convention, and courted headlines. Death, however, was silent, quick, and held mysteries that would be revealed once the curtain was drawn. Deadline for Murder, Elizabeth Montgomery's last project, was being filmed in the first few months of 1995. On television, her enthusiasm was still dazzling, but behind the camera, a terrible thing was happening. She started to feel abnormally weak, as if she had a persistent bout of the flu. Determined to keep working, she dismissed the discomfort. Professionalism had always been a component of Elizabeth's persona. However, as the weeks went by, the weariness got more difficult to ignore, and the pain became more intense. Her most severe battle began with what appeared to be a routine ailment. Elizabeth eventually consented to consult a doctor after the filming was completed. The news was devastating. Her colon cancer had progressed and was quickly moving to her liver. According to doctors, the illness had progressed to a point where there was little chance of recovery. The announcement was a tragic turn of events for a woman who was known for her strength and independence. In her final battle, the same bravery that had seen her through scandals and heartbreaks would now be put to the test. Elizabeth's decision was a reflection of who she was. She didn't want to die surrounded by hospital walls and machines. Rather, she went back to her house in Beverly Hills, a peaceful, bright location that was full of memories. She spent her last weeks there with Robert Foxworth, her husband, who was by her side the entire time. The woman who used to captivate millions with a simple nose twitch now finds contentment in simplicity and quiet. Elizabeth Montgomery died in her sleep on the morning of May 18, 1995, at the age of 62. Despite her peaceful departure, there was a huge gap left in her wake. Hollywood and beyond were rocked by the news of her passing. Fans lamented the death of a woman who had enriched their lives for decades, not simply an actor. As coworkers and admirers recalled her strength, humor, and kindness, tributes flooded in. Her star is still shining on the Hollywood Walk of Fame, where people stop to pay tribute to her brilliance even after all these years. Her tale has been preserved through documentaries, biographies, and poignant retrospectives, guaranteeing that her spirit continues to dance throughout television history. Even if her body remained mute, her influence continued to speak, and rumors of unspoken messages, broken promises, and an unfinished legacy lingered. Elizabeth had accumulated a wealth via decades of hard labor, wise investments, and ownership of enchanted royalties, with an estimated net worth of $20 million at the time of her death. Reruns, merchandise, and the undying affection of fans are the main sources of revenue for her estate. William, Robert, and Rebecca, her 3 children, were the custodians of her memory and inherited not only her fortune but also her legacy of kindness and fortitude. However, some aspects of her life are still unknown. Her lovely Agoura Hills mansion, which was once a hive of light and fun, is now quiet. An eerie mirror of the woman who entered its walls in search of tranquility. A bronze statue of Samantha, perched atop a crescent moon in Salem, Massachusetts, serves as a constant reminder of the witch that transformed both television and people's hearts. What do you think of Elizabeth Montgomery's life and legacy? Do you think she's more than simply Bewitched's endearing witch? Post your ideas and observations in the space provided below.